and let us all do we can to build a better future.
We've been covering how progressives have been getting blamed by the establishment media, by moderates, by pundits, by corporate Democrats. Progressives are getting the blame. And so AOC yesterday responded to how progressives are getting blamed by moderates. And I got a whole bunch of videos from Case Study QB. Somehow he sat through it, so we don't have to. Again, be sure to check out Case Study QB's work, support him on Twitter, check out his YouTube channel, check out his Odyssey page as well, and check out the work that he's doing for the People's Gauntlet. So let's go ahead and pull this up here. There's a lot to be said.
Ocasio-Cortez of New York. Congresswoman, good evening. Thanks for joining me on the show this evening. You were one of those progressives last year. You were one of those progressives last year who said Justice Breyer should probably retire sooner rather than later. So I'm assuming you are very pleased to hear this news today. Do you think the pressure on him worked, helped him make that decision?
I do. There's no way of actually saying what is in Justice Breyer's mind, but I do believe that the urgency of this moment, the fact that the country is very clearly on a precipice of fascism and a return to Jim Crow, the sweeping attack on voting rights in this country, and the very real threat that we have of seeing what happened, for example, with the consequences of Ruth Bader Ginsburg passing during the Trump presidency, that we could very well...
Because there's a couple things we need to address. First of all, let's be very clear about our democracy. We don't have one. Because of Citizens United McCutcheon's decision, anybody can buy a politician. We live in an oligarchy. This is a fact. Same people who buy our politicians control our media. And let's also address this thing about the Supreme Court and this big struggle and fight over it. You know, if it was more transparent, if maybe the Supreme Court judges were, made elected and they weren't in there for life till they died of old age, maybe things would be different too. I wish that there was politicians and political leaders that were supposed to raise the ruckus actually bring that to the House and Senate floor. Maybe there would be a need to really address this antiquated system that we still have. And let's face it, AOC has a large social media following. It is inexcusable for her not to use that following on social media and to use everything within her political war chest to actually rally her supporters and actually implement and be productive in fighting for progressive causes and progressive policies. There's nothing stopping her. But yet here we are, and we're getting this word salad from AOC. Now, I understand what she is saying, but let's go ahead and play the rest of this video from Case Study QB. All right, while that is still loading up, let's go ahead and at least bring up a few other things here as well. Let's go and refresh that page, and we'll go ahead and bring up a few other issues at hand about really what's happening to a lot of the progressive lawmakers. If it's good to go, let's go ahead and get that set up. All right, never mind.
Had and have to. I think that he should have gone stronger earlier, but he still has an opportunity to still go strong now, because I do believe that he's leaving some leverage on the table, both with his legislative facing strategy in the Senate, but also in his leaning on executive actions. There is a great deal that needs to be done that he can do with the stroke of his pen that he is not doing. And in order to really ensure that we are generating progress for working people, protecting the right to vote, protecting the marginalized, protecting our environment, and standing up to corrupt interests, he needs to step up and do more, I believe, in his executive authority. Either that, or he needs to ratchet it up on Manchin and Sinema.
All right, let's pause it right here. So there's a lot that Biden can do, and AOC is correct. But remember, AOC, throughout all of 2021, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, all the progressive allies in the House and Senate, gave Biden and Harris a free pass. You yourself said that the Biden-Harris administration was exceeding expectations. And through executive order, Biden can legalize cannabis. Through executive order, Biden can make Medicare for All happen. Through executive order, Biden can actually get rid of student debt. And very similar to how President Trump would appoint in his Supreme Court justice or justices, Biden can do the same thing too. Obama even had that power. But again, the Democratic establishment and their leaders and the entire DNC as a whole, they're very good at dropping the ball because that's what they're supposed to do. It's not that they're incompetent or dumb. They know what they're doing. They know that they're supposed to lose. And AOC, you've been giving the Democratic establishment all the open space to get away with every single thing that they wanted done in 2021, which was absolutely nothing, because nothing fundamentally changed. If we can, let's play the rest of the video for our viewers so they can see the rest of this. It's very important. So there we go.
Do you agree with Bernie Sanders that now may be the time for Senator Kyrsten Sinema, who blocked voting rights from passing last week, to face a primary challenge in Arizona come 2024?
Well, Mehdi, as you mentioned, that race is in 2024, and that means Kyrsten Sinema is about 4 years into her 6-year term. I don't believe she's really given a compelling case as to why she should be renominated as the Democratic nominee for United States Senate in Arizona. She has proven herself an obstacle to the right to vote in the United States. She is not an ally on civil rights. It is becoming a precipice and rather contributing to the threat that we have in stabilizing our democracy. She is not standing up to corporate interest. In fact, she is a profound ally to them. And I believe that, she is not doing what voters in Arizona sent her to do. So if a Ruben Gallego challenged her in a primary or someone else, you would potentially consider supporting a primary challenger? I mean, if it came down to someone like Ruben Gallego and Kyrsten Sinema, I think that would be the easiest decision I would ever have to make. There is no comparison. This is a state that deserves to be represented by a strong Democrat that is allied with working families and understands that we need to protect the rights of the marginalized, that understands that now is not the moment to stick up for corporations, but rather it's time to stand up for working people. And we need someone that has more allegiance to the actual people of this country than special interests.
Okay, last question before we take a break, and we're going to carry this conversation on. But I have to ask, apart from all the domestic fights that are going on, there's a big, actual, real fight, a war possibly about to happen in Europe. How concerned are you about what's happening in Ukraine? How worried are you about a full-scale war involving the U.S.? And do you think Biden has handled this crisis well so far? Badly? Okay. What's your grade?
Well, I'm quite concerned about some of the dynamics here. One of them, frankly, is that you have an entire military industrial complex outside of the U.S. military, but, part of this complex of contractors that frankly just left Afghanistan and are starved for revenue. And I'm very concerned about the urgency of this situation really becoming and materializing into a situation that could be exploited by for-profit military interests. Now, what is happening between Russia and Ukraine is of profound concern. And the Biden administration is well within their right to seek a diplomatic resolution to this issue, one that does not hurt the Ukrainian people, but allows them to exercise their right to self-determination and to continue to be a self-determined nation. And so I believe that the Biden administration is well within their right to counter Russia's aggression diplomatically, but there is not a military solution to this problem. And in fact, on top of that, there is great concern. Fareed Zakaria made an excellent point in the Washington Post that there is also oil pipelines here at play, and the potential design and entertainment of certain sanctions could precipitate an energy crisis. And so we cannot ignore the role of fossil fuels and, frankly, climate change and the great need for energy transition, the contributions that those are making to the present situation.
It's not often you hear AOC quoting Fareed Zakaria, but I'll take it. Congresswoman, stay with us. We've got a lot more to discuss.
So the reason why that clip was played first, because obviously there's a lot of issues at hand. And the second clip that we'll be pulling up is how AOC is responding to how progressives are getting smeared. But I want to just go through that piece by piece, because number one, AOC was just going over all the things that the Democrats failed to address, and now let's talk about the war that potentially could happen in the Ukraine. Now, as we've covered on Wednesday's show and on yesterday's show as well, Ukrainian officials are basically telling both sides to calm down. But yet, we're seeing this buildup, this escalation. And this conflict could get out of hand, potentially, if clearer heads do not prevail. Now, Joe Biden and the entire House and Senate were able to muster the resources needed to spend money on another ridiculous conflict. The Democratic Party, this is happening under a Democratic administration. Now, what we heard throughout all of 2021 was the Democratic Party didn't have enough to get things done for housing, or for student debt forgiveness, or medical debt forgiveness, or so many other issues. But yet the Democratic Party is more than happy to continue on with supporting the military-industrial complex. And this is the party that AOC is supposed to be, reforming. Justice Democrats, brand new Congress, our revolution. Where's the ruckus at? Where's the stage-ins, where's the sit-ins in front of Nancy or Chucky Boy's office, like how you did way early on? How come you're not rallying your supporters for an anti-war movement? Ending this ridiculous conflict before it gets fully out of hand. You cannot win a nuclear war. It is impossible. And this is happening under a Democratic presidential administration. It's pretty pathetic at this point. I want to pull up now the second video where AOC is addressing how progressives are getting smeared and getting all the blame from this infighting that we're seeing in the Democratic Party. Hold on to your hats, folks. This one's entertaining.
It doesn't increase the deficit. And maybe the best news of all, it will actually help alleviate inflation. The Build Back Better plan lowers prices for families and gets people working.
The president met with some of the nation's top CEOs today as he tries to salvage major components of his stalled agenda. Still with us, New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Congresswoman, what is your reaction when you hear some in your party, some in the media, already blaming the left for the midterms defeat that seems to be coming your party's way and for Biden's low approval ratings? What do you say to their argument that Joe Biden went too far left in his first year, he was too ambitious, or as your House colleague Abigail Spanberger has said, nobody elected him to be FDR?
Wait, can we pause right here?
Well, I think folks like that.
Now, real quick, just a heads up, there will be some sound issues in this video, but because AOC loses connection and then she'll be joining back in. But first, before we continue on, with that comment about FDR, what did we hear from Bernie Sanders about Biden? That he could be the next FDR. We heard from a lot of progressives throughout all of 2020 during the general election, and how throughout all of 2021, Biden is the next FDR. He can get things done. He's pragmatic. He knows how to talk to Republicans. He knows how to talk to blue dog Democrats. He's got this big agenda. If we hold Biden's feet to the fire, he'll move left. He'll listen to us. Progressives did everything they could to turn out to vote for him in 2020, so he owes us. Throughout all that time, there was a lot of talk about him being FDR. Fake propaganda, of course. So, just before AOC answers that, just remember, we heard from a lot of cul-de-sac progressives, blue check marks, even other Democratic lawmakers, on how Biden was able to get things done, how he can get things done. But what happened throughout all of 2021? We didn't get Medicare for all. We didn't get student debt forgiveness. This Build Back Better, the thing that he's harping on, the thing that the progressives, or at least in the House, are trying to fight for, it went from $7 trillion to $1.75 trillion. Again, Biden and FDR are two different people, but I will say this. Biden, unlike FDR, can't get anything done. But FDR, throughout his entire terms of being president, was able to implement a lot of his foreign and domestic policies. There's a big difference between FDR and Biden. And right now, it is Biden's fault that the Democrats are going to be walking into the slaughter. Not progressives, by the way. But remember, a lot of progressive lawmakers, through their silent, obedient consent, allowed this situation to happen in the first place. They should have been raising the ruckus. They should have been holding his feet to the fire, but they didn't. Let's play the rest of the video.
What they don't want to admit is that Biden has governed pretty much exactly the way they have asked him to. But the problem is that the way they have asked him to govern has been to slow down, not do too much. And we are now seeing the political consequences of not directly improving people's lives quickly. And so, I mean, I can't really point, unfortunately, I can't point to any major move that President Biden.
All right, let's pause it here because there will be some sound issues here. So let's go ahead and address just a couple of things. AOC, there was a thing called force to vote that you ignored, where it would have held Nancy Mama Bear, and all the other Democratic lawmakers and Republican lawmakers in the House by forcing the vote, trying to get a Medicare for all on the House floor for a vote. Now, would it have succeeded? Maybe yes, maybe no. But it would have shined a light on the heartless Democratic and Republican lawmakers that wouldn't give their citizens Medicare for all at the height of the pandemic. We don't have Medicare for all. Where were you for forced to vote? That was something that could have been done. That was something that could have raised the ruckus. And see, the thing is, the Democrats, and especially the progressives in the Democratic Party, were playing it safe. Everyone was still drunk on their mimosas after defeating Trump and enjoying their well-deserved brunch. Well-deserved. Where was the AOC and the other progressives for the fight for 15? Oh, Cinema and Manchin just shot that down. Where was AOC and the other progressives for the March for Medicare for All or the 3-day General Strike Summit meeting? Nowhere to be seen. So there's a lot that Biden could have done, but remember, the House progressives and their inability to challenge Biden because probably they got marching orders not to challenge the party. This is why the midterms are looking bad for the Democrats, because the Democratic Party willingly walked itself into this situation. And let's say potentially the Democrats do lose the midterms. They still can come out as winners because now they have a lot of fuel for propaganda and fundraising. Let's play the rest of the video.
Lost the Congresswoman there. We'll see if we can get her back. That was in such an important answer there, talking about Biden's. I want to hear what she was about to say. What move was she about to point to? Let's see if we can get her back. Otherwise, we will.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Hello?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Let's see if our viewers can hear.
Great.
You're back.
Sorry
It was you stopped at the most cryptic moment. You said, I can't point to one thing, and then you disappeared. So let's hear what that one thing was.
Well, here's the thing. I can't point to one major agenda where progressives or this so-called left sidelined the of the party in some dramatic fashion that can lead to this. I mean, the moderate end of the party has received everything that they have wanted from President Biden, including President Biden as the nominee himself. They got their president, they got their agenda, they got their sequence, they got their infrastructure plan with no BBB. They got all of it. And I can't really.
And so, AOC, how did they get all of it? When Bernie Sanders decided to be a cuck and drop out of the race. And remember that big little summit meeting that the Biden and Sanders campaign were doing? The Biden campaign dropped all of Bernie's policies. Bernie's compromise was to build back better, starting at $7 trillion, fizzled away and chopped down to 1.75, and it's probably going to drop down a lot lower. Everything that the moderates wanted, they got. And remember, just like in 2016, just during the primary, when there was election fraud taking place, where the DNC establishment was working everything they could to make sure Hillary Clinton was the nominee, the DNC establishment was doing everything they could to make, again, Biden the nominee. And Bernie dropped out. Bernie Sanders dropped out. And he let it happen. The House progressives let all this happen by not raising the ruckus because he got your marching orders, or maybe it's because you didn't want to be too much of a troublemaker. But remember, by being obedient, by being nice, by playing it nice with the party, you keep on getting yourselves slapped in the face. Another brilliant example to bring up was when the squad, especially AOC and Cori Bush, had to run to the House to stop Nancy Pelosi from adjourning Congress. Because if they didn't get there in time, oh no, millions of Americans would be evicted from their homes. But somehow AOC and Cori Bush seemed to forgot and had conveniently run back But by that time, it was too little too late. And throughout the entire sit-in, they had their little victory. But it still means nothing, as Americans are still being evicted from their homes and apartments. Still, as we speak. So, gee, AOC, how's that compromise working out? You were supposed to raise the ruckus. You're supposed to be a fighter. But we saw how you broke down as Nancy Pelosi berated you and made you change your no vote to a present vote. Let's play the rest of the video.
Point to any real substantive or serious or intellectually rigorous argument as to anything that the progressive wing has done, aside from supporting President Biden, oftentimes more than the moderate wing of the party has, in a way that could lead to sinking poll numbers. There's just, when you don't change people's lives, people get upset. And we can improve people's lives. We can forgive student loan debt, and we can improve his poll numbers while we're at it.
Yeah, last time I checked, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema were not self-styled socialists. What do you want to see happen to Build Back Better now? Is it dead? Because last night, former Obama advisor David Plouffe told me on this show that the Dems now basically have to just give Manchin what he wants, put what he wants in it, lose the rest. If you have to break it into chunks, do it. But you pass it and you run on whatever gets passed in November. Do you agree with that strategy?
Well, the complication with that is that that's already been done with Build Back Better. Manchin issued really a laundry list of requests and demands and changes to what he wanted to Build Back Better. The first, that was the story of 2020. He wanted it decoupled. He wanted it shrunk. He wanted it changed. And he was essentially catered to throughout this entire process. The issue that we have is that every day, Senator Manchin wakes up, he has a different demand. And he wants to start over from scratch every single day. And so that is a quite difficult position to work with. This idea of just give him what he wants. He has been given everything that he wants. And so I believe that what the president, some avenues, not just the president, but the party, that we really need to explore what are the alternative measures to either bring Senator Manchin to the table, or how do we start exploring elements of Biden's agenda that can move forward without, without Senator Manchin.
And of course, Joe Manchin blocked his own voting rights bill last week. The bill that he wrote, he blocked it from going through. So a point taken. Last quick question. We're almost out of time, but I have to ask. You recently recovered from COVID after a trip to Florida. What did you make of the whole bizarre furore on the right from Republicans, from Fox, on your COVID diagnosis, and that you weren't wearing a mask on vacation outdoors, and you went on vacation to a red state, Florida? How dare you? You even had Governor Ron DeSantis' team trying to make hay with it.
Well, I can really tell you for sure how many of those Republicans fly into my airport and my district in New York City and LaGuardia Airport to come in and beg New Yorkers for money, and to come into my state, come into my district all the time, to grovel at the hands of their donors. As Florida goes, and Republicans do not own states just because they happen to have won a gubernatorial election. And not only that, but I can tell you that the people of Florida certainly seem very revved up and ready to go to organize for the 2022 midterm elections. And I'd be more than happy to return to the state of Florida to really help them organize.
On that note, we'll have to leave it there. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Of course. Thank you so much.
So let's just address a couple things. In that clip, there were some sound issues. That was on MSNBC's part. You would think they'd be able to be more on point with their tech and gear. So there we go. So looking at that entire conversation and AOC coming to defense for progressives, what we got was word salad. And let's face it, throughout all of 2021, the House progressives, the progressives in the Senate, let this happen. Their silent, obedient consent allowed for the Democrats to basically be walking into a slaughter that they're more than willing to be a part of. Now, again, the key thing for this midterm election cycle will be voter turnout. But the Democratic Party has a long history of failure, eating itself up, and walking into absolute disaster. They are incapable of fighting for the policies that they run on, and because of this, Who knows how it will play out in certain different states? But as a final note for that part of the story, because there's 3 more clips that I want to bring up, especially when it comes down to what's happening with the Democratic Party and how they're losing voters and how mainstream media has the perfect excuse for the Democratic Party to use, vote more Democrats. AOC, once again, coming back to that pitiful display in Florida. Who can all forget what she was saying, especially to Republican commentators saying, oh, you're just jealous because you can't be with me or be in a relationship with me or anything else of that petty nature. I don't know what the plan the Democrats are going to run on or what kind of message that they're going to have, but you got nothing done in 2021, and the evidence is out there. Everyone sees it. You got nothing done in 2021. What are you going to do that's going to make you stand out differently in 2022? Let's play this next video from Case Study QB.
Now, longtime Democratic strategist James Carville wants his party to rethink how it organizes and spends money. In an interview with Vox, Carville said this, quote, Jamie Harrison raised over $100 million only to lose his Senate race to Lindsey Graham by 10 points. Amy McGrath runs for Senate in Kentucky, raises over $90 million only to get crushed by Mitch McConnell. They were always going to lose those races, but Democrats keep doing this stupid stuff. They're too damn emotional. Democrats obsess over high-profile races they can't win because that's where all the attention is. We are addicted to hopeless causes. James continues, what about the Secretary of State in Wisconsin or the Attorney General race in Michigan? How much money are Democrats and progressives around the country sending to those candidates? I'm telling you, if Democrats are worried about voting rights and election integrity, then these are the sorts of races they should support and volunteer for, because this is where the action is, and this is where things will be decided. Joe James never mincing words, again, talking to his fellow Democrats here in this new Vox interview.
Boy, he's so right, and this is something that you know, I'm going to start talking about the difference between Republicans and Democrats and how they think. Republicans just think so much more strategically for the most part. It's calculating. They figure out the power. I mean, you go back to the moral majority and Ralph Reed. What did they do? They started with school boards. They started with local elections. They built from the ground up. So by the time they were running national races, I mean, things were, you know, They had built it up. The same thing's been happening with the Republicans. You know, Jim Vandehei, you know this very well. Republicans have focused on state legislatures. They focused on local races. And then they'll whine about, you know, the Rittenhouse jury, the instructions that they're getting. And they'll just say, oh, American democracy sucks. And how in the world could anybody be allowed to do what Rittenhouse was allowed to do and walk? I'll tell you how. Like, you know, people go out and vote, and they elect state representatives that are going to pass certain laws that allow things. And I'm talking about Rittenhouse now, but you could talk about jury instructions in any state, and I'll hear some progressive complaining about it, and they act as if these laws come down from on high. They act as if their redistricting laws are just part of a broken democratic system. No, it's not. Our democracy works, and the people who are redistricting are the people that win local races.
Hold on. Our democracy does work, but it works if you're rich. And what we're seeing, especially in states that are right now redrawing their districts, we're seeing a lot of gerrymandering taking place. It's only there to benefit the two-party system. And to be very clear here, one of the rare times where I'll agree with Morning Joe, look, the Republican Party is very effective at building a ground-up establishment. They're winning local elections, a lot of Senate seats and House seats at the state level. You see across this country are majority GOP. The Democratic Party knows what they're doing. They know that they're supposed to lose like this, which is why we haven't seen such a massive movement from the Democratic Party. Remember, the Democratic Party, especially the House leadership, has been under Nancy Pelosi, and ever since she took the reins, the Democrats have been losing constantly. But they're very good at fundraising. So the thing is, right now, the establishment, the leadership in the Democratic Party, they know what they're doing. They're not being stupid on purpose. This is what they're supposed to do. They lose, they fundraise, they win, and even if they get a majority, they still screw it up because that's what they're supposed to do. Leadership has no new ideas, and this whole idea, especially in 2018, about reforming the Democratic Party through brand new Congress or Justice Democrats or our revolution, it was never going to happen because the people who we elected to be the rabble-rousers, like AOC, can't contend with leadership because leadership gave them their marching orders. There's no way you can reform a corrupt party because that corrupt party, known as the Democratic Party, they're supposed to lose on purpose. That's what they're good at. And the GOP can still do whatever they want. It's built like that. It's supposed to run like this. Which is why we have to build movements outside the two-party system. You can't reform two parties that know what they're doing, and that is helping out their rich donors and screwing over the rest of us. Let's play the rest of the video.
That win state legislatures, that control governorships. And Carville's right. Democrats are always focusing on the lost cause, always focusing on the big prize. They're too emotional. Republicans are just far more calculating, and Democrats need to take a page from their book.
Well, stipulating that Carville seems to pop up every 3 months with some kind of attack on his own party, which is what usually gets him into the conversation. He's not wrong. I mean, as you said, Republicans are more ruthless and they've been more methodical about what matters. How do you control the redistricting process? By winning local races that most people ignore. How do you control the courts? Now they control the courts for essentially a generation, particularly if you look at the Supreme Court. I don't think Democrats' problem last time around was not raising enough money. They raised gobs of money, more money than we thought that they would raise. I do think it's about figuring out, can you accommodate the right type of candidates in districts that might not fit with the sort of the dominant orthodoxy, particularly that you hear from activists on Twitter or activists on cable TV inside the Democratic Party. It's much more about the candidates. The map is tough in some areas for Democrats, but if you just look at demographics, they should be doing better. They should be doing better than they're doing, and I think it's why they're in a tough spot this time around. Think about the Republican Party. They're probably going to win the House. Look like they have a very good chance to win the House in what shouldn't be a great environment for them. You think about January 6th, you think about the Trump years, think about some of the internal divisions they have, and yet because they thought about redistricting, not just this last round, but 10 years ago, you have a map that doesn't match population in terms of if you just allocate who wins how many votes, how many seats that you have. It works for them to their advantage. And that those little things matter while we pay attention to sort of the big, often distractions. And I think Democrats at the establishment level too often do get distracted by that.
Okay. So look, no matter how this midterm plays out, I've said this before, whether the Republicans control the House or Senate, it's 50-50 between the Dems and the Republicans, or the Democrats hold on to their majority or get more seats. Nothing's going to fundamentally change because the system is designed in a way so that the rich can get richer, get legislation that's going to benefit them and their corporations and their allies, all the while the rest of us are left struggling day in, day out just to make ends meet. And throughout this entire country, no matter whether you're in a red state or a blue state, the stories are the same. People are being evicted. People are struggling with debt. People don't have enough money to buy food or medicine or pay the bills. This is a country that right now is in the beginning stages of a long and disastrous collapse. And our lawmakers don't even think about us. But again, you know, when we look at the progressive movement, and especially how the word progressive has been co-opted by the Democratic Party, we have to remember that the Democrats have been walking into this failure even long before Trump got into office. I want to play this clip here from Case Study QB where we have to address the person who maybe is really responsible for the rise of Trump and the epic failure of the Democratic Party, and that is our good friend Barack Obama. Let's play this video.
Was a criticism that was raised when Barack Obama left office, that he left the Democratic Party nationally in a pretty poor condition. Has the party just got seduced slightly by the idea that demographics is destiny, and so they haven't paid as much attention as they needed to this scaffolding of the party around the country, to the infrastructure of the party?
Well, look, I think it's true that Democrats have not paid enough attention to the state level and local races. I mean, that's just a fact. And they haven't emphasized those races. They haven't put in that they haven't found the right candidates and they haven't supported them in the right way that they could win. And so, you know, if you look at the demographics of the country and the population as a whole, and you look at how many states are controlled by Republicans in the state houses, in the legislatures, and in the governor's mansions, there's a mismatch. So yes, I mean, I think the basic point is true. I don't think it's necessarily a mistake, despite what my friend James Carville says, to spend money on a candidate like Jamie Harrison was in South Carolina against Lindsey Graham. That, I would argue, is a laying of a foundation for the Democratic Party in South Carolina that the kind of investment that did not pay off last year, but that could pay off 10 years from now as the state changes and as it becomes, you know, it's a red state now. It could trend toward purple, and so no, you have to do both things. I think you have to play in those big high-profile races, but you definitely have to do more on the local level to make those decisions that really count and that decide our national politics. I mean, you know, the playing field for the House is warped, and it shouldn't be.
So, let's talk about the legacy of Obama. When he first got inaugurated into office, him and his vice president, Joe Biden, had a strong majority in the Democratic House and Senate. They had everything. They could have implemented a lot of change and even held those responsible for the 2008 economic collapse accountable for their crimes. And this is where people saw the real face of the Democratic Party, or at least were starting to wake up to the fact. Obama didn't do anything. He got rid of habeas corpus, led us from 2 wars to 7. Again, he's the one who built the cages for the kids to be in, you know, the one that Trump gets blamed for and that Trump obviously used. And of course, at the Biden-Harris administration, they're still carrying on a lot of Trump's policies, which is the legacy of Barack Obama. Throughout that entire time, Obama could have done so much, but he chose not to because he is a neoliberal, neoconservative Democrat. He is a corporatist and establishment through and through. And so when we played those videos earlier of AOC defending the Democratic Party, or at least acknowledging that Biden and the entire establishment Democratic Party, they can't get anything done, they got all that they want, it's because progressives and independents gave the silent, obedient consent towards the Democratic lawmakers that they can keep doing this as long as we keep on voting for them. It's not working anymore. There's no incentive to vote Democrat. There's no incentive to vote Republican, because no matter what happens during this 2022 midterm election cycle, it's all going to not change. Nothing will fundamentally change until the people step up and say no more. Now, I know we've been going on with this segment a little bit longer, but I think it's very important that we end this segment with the final video, because this is what we're going to be bombarded with. Shout out again to Case Study QB. And what we're going to hear from this person is vote Democrat, vote Democrat, vote Democrat. Vote more Democrats in. But every time we do, they still can't get anything done because there's always going to be a cinema or a mansion to be a roadblock. It's time for the people to break away from the two-party system. Let's play this video.
Here's what I say to all the progressives out there that are frustrated with Joe Manchin, frustrated with Kirsten Sinema. Elect more Democratic senators. That's the way you do this. You know, in many instances, these guys are immovable objects. I don't agree with them, but they have been immovable objects. So if you want to dilute their power in the Democratic Party, we got to win some elections in November, or we're going to be dealing with the kind of obstruction that Barack Obama dealt with when Mitch McConnell was in charge while he was president. Here's what I say to all the progressives out there that are frustrated.
Yeah, and we've heard this. And mind you, this person lost her election. So at the end of the day, we can be bombarded with the same propaganda, elect more Democrats, but nothing is fundamentally changing. Working class citizens are still struggling, and AOC and the entire Congressional Progressive Caucus had the opportunity throughout all of 2021 to try and raise the ruckus, hold Biden's feet to the fire, but they didn't do it. They were nowhere for forced to vote. They were nowhere for the Force to Vote for 15. They were nowhere for the March for Medicare for All. They were nowhere for the 3-day General Strike Summit meeting. And this is all the evidence we need for all of us to not vote Democrat and not vote Republican, but instead support good ballot initiatives and build infrastructure for movements outside the two-party system and start actually building real third parties. Now's the time. If it's not being made clear for everyone, or if you know people who still vote Democrat or Republican, help them wake up to the fact that they are participating in a two-party system that doesn't give a damn about them.